This conversation between Alex and Jennette on Call Her Daddy podcast was incredibly authentic and vulnerable sharing in how they explored the impact of trauma, both in childhood and how it shows up later in adulthood. So I just felt so compelled to want to add to the conversation because so much of what they talk about is deeply relatable for so many people. What this story shows us is how the loss of our voice in early childhood becomes the blueprint for adult relationships. When you learn that being good means being quiet or silent, you not only lose your voice, but you also slowly stop listening to it. And that's what we're going to dive into today. Hi, I'm Dr. Pam, therapist and relationship counselor. Welcome to my channel. I am so glad that you are here. And if you are new here, welcome. I am so passionate about helping you grow both personally and in your relationships. And if that is something that you would like more of, I'd love for you to subscribe so we can keep growing together. Okay, I want to start here with one of the biggest roadblocks that I see as a therapist for personal growth in therapy.
When you went to therapy, you quit because you couldn't handle the thought of your mom being abusive when you started to get underneath all of it. What do you remember about that first session?
Oh my God, feeling like my body was on fire when that was even kind of suggested to, your mother is abusive. This is, she kind of laid it out for me. And I just felt instantly like I have to run.
The challenge of looking at our upbringing is so much harder than most people realize. And part of the reason for that is that many people come from this place.
Hearing my doctor speaking with her, I didn't know exactly what was going on, but I had a feeling, that gut instinct, something was wrong. And I shoved that gut instinct down and I said, okay, there's no place for that because mom would never do that to me, right? Mom would not, come on, she's my mom, whatever. And I just kept giving her the benefit of the doubt at the expense of my own self-trust. For a long time.
The reason that looking at our upbringing is far more difficult than most people realize is in part because first, it seems unimaginable that the person who is supposed to love us and care for us more than anyone else in the world would actually harm us. And the facts themselves are often very unclear. Childhood experiences are remembered through emotion, adaptation, and survival. Acknowledging that a parent may have been abusive or even unintentionally harmful isn't just painful, it raises deeper questions. What does that mean about me, about my worth, about my reality growing up? Was I loved? Can I still love that parent? What does this mean about having a relationship with them now? It is a lot to unpack. And there also tends to be a powerful loyalty to parents that keeps us protecting them, often at the expense of protecting ourselves. Untangling that loyalty takes time because it requires separating compassion for a parent from honesty about the impact that they had on us. And this does not mean that you can't have compassion for your parents. It just means learning to hold both compassion and honesty at the same time. Compassion for who they are and what they carried, and honesty about the impact their behavior had on you. Many don't even initially recognize that their upbringing had a negative impact on them because what they lived through was their normal. When something is familiar, it doesn't register as harmful. It simply registers as life.
You have talked about and written about some of the extreme codependency tactics that your mom used growing up, like not allowing you to shower by yourself, making you share a diary with her. You couldn't have your own. You had to share it with her. How did that impact your sense of identity and, more importantly, freedom?
I didn't feel I had either, I guess.
When you grow up without a clear sense of who you are, especially environments where there is little privacy, autonomy, or emotional freedom, identity development doesn't just slow down, it often stops. So in adulthood, many people find themselves having to begin again, sorting out who they are separate from who they were expected to be or who they were told to be. Who you are isn't absent. Your development was interrupted before it could fully form. Those parts of who you are still there, but they were never acknowledged, supported, or allowed to emerge.
You've never been able to be like, what does Jennette want?
Yes.
Ever.
Yes. And I think, what the memoir made me realize is how unfortunately common that is. I mean, that's the biggest thing that people tell me when they come up to me is that they had that same experience with their parent. And there's, they couldn't vocalize their own needs. They couldn't stand to themselves. They couldn't feel their own emotions.
Because of the power imbalance.
Exactly.
And that's right. As a child, you have no real power. Vulnerability isn't a choice when you're a child. It just simply comes with being a child. I work with many adults who struggle to name their emotions, identify their needs, or stand up for themselves because growing up, those skills were just not supported. They were actively discouraged. So when Jennette names this struggle, she's speaking to something many people live with. So let's slow this down a bit and look at it more closely. Alex asked Jennette about how power and control showed up in her childhood when her mom was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer when Jennette was only 2 years old.
Our whole family, the way I describe it is that it felt like it was a held breath and that it was like, okay, when's mom going to die? And me being at that age, it's really pretty pre-verbal. And I think that's really... I think that really influenced my life for a long time. I think feeling the weight of the gravity of, okay, this person's death is imminent, and obviously not being able to articulate any of that or put any words to it or understand it.
The challenge with trauma that occurs around the age of 2 is that it happens during pre-verbal stage of development, as Jennette noted. At that age, experiences are not stored as stories or memories that we can later recall. They are stored in the body, in the nervous system. As a result, the emotional impact of pre-verbal trauma often shows up in adulthood as intense feelings, physical sensations, or reactions that seem to come out of nowhere. People know that something is happening, but they don't have a clear narrative for where it came from or how to make sense of it because it happened when you were pre-verbal. This can be deeply confusing and often leads to self-blame when in reality the body is remembering what the mind never had words for. So when Jennette described her childhood as everyone holding their breath, this wouldn't be a conscious memory that she can recall. For a pre-verbal child, that level of threat becomes the background of life. The nervous system remains alert, watchful, and braced for loss. In adulthood, that early imprint often shows up as hypervigilance, scanning for danger, monitoring other people's emotions, feeling responsible for keeping things calm, and struggling to fully relax even when life is stable. And this is where self-erasure often begins. When your nervous system is organized around survival, your own needs, feelings, and preferences get pushed aside in favor of keeping others okay. Over time, safety becomes more important than self-expression, and many adults don't realize that they have lost their voice. They simply learned very early that being attuned to others mattered more than being connected to themselves.
That kind of taught you to prioritize your mom's wants and feelings over your own.
Oof. I mean, I think that was maybe the most pivotal piece that caused me to do that. I felt like she could be gone at any moment. And I think when you're young, you don't necessarily know what you need, but you know the person in charge can help you with that. And so I think it was a mode of survival that I was in for a long time of how can I do whatever I can to help keep my mom alive, because if my mom's alive, then I'm safe.
Can you imagine you're 2 years old, no one is tending to your emotions and your needs, and then you become whatever it takes to keep your mom alive so that you are safe? And the key here is that her mom not only allowed Jennette to prioritize her mom's feelings over Jennette's, but she almost demanded it.
She went into remission within, I want to say like a year and a half, somewhere around there. But she really, in my eyes, utilized her cancer. She really did not let me, or I have 3 older brothers, or any of us forget, mommy had cancer. Mommy could go at any minute. The cancer could come back at any minute. And so it was really just this tense feeling in the household. I mean, eggshells feeling all the time.
What made this especially damaging is that Jennette's mom recovered from cancer, yet the possibility of it returning was repeatedly used as a way to control the emotional stability of the family. The message wasn't simply, I was sick. It became, this could come back at any time, which kept everyone in a constant state of fear and vigilance. For children, that creates an ongoing sense that their behavior, their emotions, or independence could somehow trigger loss. Over time, they learn to stay quiet, compliant, and hyper-attuned, not because they are choosing to erase themselves, but because self-suppression feels like the safest way to keep the family intact.
And how do you think your mom's sickness impacted the way that you thought you were allowed to just like feel about her as a whole? Like, could you ever be like, wait, well, she's sick, so I can't, like, were you ever able to feel like you could be annoyed or resentful?
No, I think it's both because of my mom's cancer and because I grew up Mormon. And I think those two things are really, they are in tandem with guilt. It's like, okay, this person has cancer, she's dying, and you're Mormon, and you have to be nice. So it was really, I would feel such profound guilt if I even thought an annoyed thought or felt anything that was other than, oh, mommy's the greatest thing, that I think I would just stuff down that annoyance.
2 things are important to name here. First, when a child learns directly or indirectly that they are not allowed to have negative feelings toward their parents, those feelings don't disappear. Instead, they turn inward as guilt and shame for something that is entirely human. Anger, resentment, and frustration are normal feelings in close relationships, but when they are forbidden, the child concludes, something must be wrong with me for feeling this way. And second, this didn't happen in a vacuum. Jennette grew up Mormon in a culture that emphasizes, as she said, being nice, agreeable, and self-sacrificing. And layer onto that the broader cultural conditioning girls receive to be nice, accommodating, cute, sweet, quiet, and you get a powerful moral framework where goodness is measured by how little you disrupt others. The messages run deep, shaping not just behavior, but identity, making it difficult in adulthood to trust your own emotions, your own anger, speak up for yourself, or take up space without feeling like you're doing something wrong.
Suppression of anger are tied to developing an eating disorder. How did those 2 states of being relate to your mother?
I'm thinking, I don't know why I'm like thinking of anger. I'm thinking of suppressing anger. It's such a theme in my life. And that's the one that I really was like, ooh, that's a bad one, so we can't go near that. What was the question?
When Jennette laughed in that moment, it's important to understand that this is not humor for her. Laughter is often a nervous system response to discomfort, especially when someone is touching on emotions that were historically unsafe to feel or express. Even in adulthood, talking about anger can activate old conditioning that says, this isn't allowed. When that happens, the body can move into deflection, laughing, minimizing, or momentarily losing the thread of the conversation.
What was the question?
As you saw, Jennette had to ask, what was the question?
Did you feel her anger ever?
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, she would chase my dad around the house with a steak knife. Like there were outbursts frequently. There were mood swings constantly, outbursts frequently, daily. But I was just scared of her anger. And I think being so scared of her anger is what made me really unable to process my own, see my own in any way.
Notice that she laughs again here. This is another moment of her discomfort. When a parent's anger is terrifying to a child, the nervous system doesn't just fear the parent's rage, it begins to associate anger itself with danger. So a child learns anger is bad, anger is unsafe. And as an adult, that conditioning often shows up in two ways. First, when anger surfaces internally, it's immediately paired with fear and shame. Something is wrong with me for feeling this. And second, because there was never healthy modeling or permission to express anger, the child never learned how to recognize, regulate, or communicate anger. Over time, that often leads to self-suppression and self-erasure. So instead of using anger as information about what feels wrong or unsafe or about unmet needs, it gets pushed down, softened, or laughed away. The person learns as an adult to stay agreeable, quiet, and accommodating, not because they lack feelings, but because expressing them once felt too dangerous. Reclaiming anger in adulthood begins by learning to notice it without judgment, letting it clarify what feels wrong or needs attention, and practicing expressing it in contained, safe ways with safe people rather than suppressing it or exploding. What we're really seeing in Jennette's story is how early survival strategies quietly become lifelong patterns. When a child grows up needing to stay vigilant, emotionally attuned, and be a good girl or a good boy in order to feel safe, their own needs and feelings gradually move to the background. And when self-erasure becomes the way that we stay safe, it often shows up in very specific adult patterns. People-pleasing, chronic inauthenticity, and a deep difficulty speaking up for ourselves, even when something doesn't feel right.
I was kind of a chronic people pleaser and trying to, so consumed with being polite and saying the right thing and saying, the appropriate thing and the thing that the person needs to feel okay about themselves. And so that was my mode of operating. My primary mode of operating was, how can I just make this other person feel comfortable? Meanwhile, I was a nervous wreck, uncomfortable ball of stress for so long.
When Jennette described herself as a nervous wreck, an uncomfortable ball of stress, that one sentence captures the cost of self-erasure. What looks like compliance on the outside is often intense anxiety on the inside. Self-erasure is a learned survival strategy. And as a child, when no one was consistently tending to her emotional needs, she learned to focus outward, monitoring and managing others in order to feel safe. The belief becomes this: if everyone else is okay, then I will be okay. This is where chronic people-pleasing, as she described, is born. When safety is tied to keeping others calm, happy, or stable, pleasing becomes automatic rather than intentional. Over time, the outward focus becomes the blueprint for adult relationships, prioritizing others and their needs, minimizing yourself, staying hyper-attuned to others, not because the person lacks a self, but because self-suppression once meant survival. So what helped her endure childhood is what later can make adulthood feel so exhausting, because it is exhausting to constantly tend to others and not yourself.
There was one time when I had tried to bring it up to my mom and said, I don't want to act anymore. And she really instantly went into that kind of the mood switch that she was really, really common to her, where it was, what? No, you're going to break mommy's heart. What? No, you're so good. This is our chance. This is our chance. This is our family's chance. And it's hysterics. It's that, but it's like tears pouring down the cheek, screaming, like really, really hysterical response. And so as a kid, I think it's impossible not to program that as, okay, don't do that again. Don't ever say that again. That's not an option. That's not okay.
So Jennette learned very early that having needs of her own and communicating them came with serious consequences. When she tried to express her needs to her mother became hysterical, framing Jennette's needs as devastating, as something that would break her heart and threaten the family's stability and well-being. Because Jennette's acting and income were communicated as essential to the family, the message became even heavier. Your needs are dangerous. They hurt the people you love, and over time, that belief gets internalized. It's no longer just, don't say this to mom. It becomes, never express your needs at all. A child learns to equate self-expression with harm and silence with safety. So in adulthood, this often shows up as difficulty naming needs, fear of disappointing others, and a deep belief that taking up space will somehow cause damage. So an eating disorder can become a way to reclaim control when life once felt uncontrollable.
Jamie said, in what ways is your eating disorder helping you? And I was shocked. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm sitting here to try to get over this thing. I don't want to have this anymore. I don't want to be throwing up 8 times a day. What do you mean? What good is it bringing you? He goes, well, you have to accept that it's bringing you something good in order to move through it and find something that can bring you at least something as effective, if not more, preferably more, so that you can replace this with that new thing. And so really recognizing its value was this odd kind of process of going, okay, I have to really accept that this thing was a positive for me in certain ways and really helped me survive in certain ways.
Jennette's therapist asked her a powerful question: how is the eating disorder helping you? And while she didn't fully answer how it was helping her, this is something I have heard many times in my work with people who struggle with eating disorders. People often describe their eating disorder as the one thing that feels consistently there for them. When they are overwhelmed, stressed, lonely, or emotionally flooded, it becomes a reliable way to cope. Difficult emotions get managed through control, restriction, or rituals when there was never another safe way to regulate emotions. So over time, an eating disorder can feel predictable, even dependable, comforting, not because it's healthy, but because it offers structure and relief when relationships, emotions, or just life itself becomes chaotic or feels unsafe. This is why letting go of an eating disorder can feel terrifying. It's not only about food or weight, it's about losing something that once helped you survive. Adults begin to heal when they develop new ways to regulate emotions, feel grounded in their bodies, and experience consistency through relationships, routines, and self-trust rather than control.
Thinking that I was mature, thinking that I was so smart that this could happen. And also, I hadn't really felt a deep connection with anybody my age at that point. But I remember thinking like, oh yeah, there's just something about me that's a little different. Like, I'm special. Like, that's what it felt like for me. I'm special. I can connect with older people. Younger people aren't on my wavelength. Like, please.
Underneath all of these patterns is the same core wound: the belief that love must be earned, that needs are dangerous, and that rejection is always just one misstep away. None of these behaviors are flaws. They are adaptations. They are what happens when you and your body learn early that connection requires self-suppression, and adulthood becomes an unconscious attempt to finally feel safe, seen, and loved. If you recognize yourself in any part of this story, I want to be very clear about something. These patterns are not who you are. They are what you learned. They formed a nervous system that was trying to stay safe in an environment where safety depended on self-suppression. And what was learned can be gently unlearned. Finding your voice in adulthood doesn't happen all at once, and it doesn't require becoming someone you're not. It begins quietly, by noticing what you feel, by questioning old rules about goodness and worth, and by learning that connection doesn't have to cost you yourself. It's about giving yourself what was missing and discovering that it's possible to be both connected and fully yourself. Well, that is a wrap for today. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you next time.